Have you considered that it's not actually Skype that's the problem, but it could be your cranky old computer that needs replacing?
It could well be. Well, it's relatively new, the laptop. But
or have you just been playing Red Dead Redemption all weekend and gummed up the works completely?
Oh, it's barely capable of running solitaire.
Welcome back to the Measuring Up Podcast, episode Sweet 16. Yes, more than halfway through Season 2, there is no turning back now. This is the UK's first, and as far as we know, only commercial joinery podcast. There may well be a very good reason for that. I'm Peter Millard, and as well as running a virtual 10-minute workshop on YouTube, I also run a very much real-life carpentry and cabinet-making business here in West London.
And I'm Andy MacLellan, and I run a cabinet-making business up in Newcastle, in sunny Newcastle upon Tyne, and I also run the Gosforth Handyman YouTube channel as well. And every couple of weeks we get together and we have a bit of a chat about joinery and what the world of self-employment is like in the UK, but we know we've got listeners all around the world, and a massive welcome to everyone listening to the show, no matter where you are.
We get some great feedback from you, our listeners, and we've got a couple of great pieces today. But before we get into that, Andy Mac, how have you been?
I've been busy, and it has been a crazy few weeks, but things are finally starting to calm down. You might have seen on Instagram I was working on those cases, transport cases last week.
They looked really nice.
Oh,
they looked really good.
Thank you. They turned into a much bigger job than I was anticipating, to the point that I've made a video all about it on my Patreon, where I'm basically explaining to people that things don't always go according to plan, and
having done 2 installs this week, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, massively underpriced those display, and not the cabinets, the cases, and yeah, it's interesting, and kind of it was just going through my mind some of the people who, and it's come to both of our channels where people have said that we're too expensive, or you know, and we're overpricing on jobs and stuff, which we very much aren't. And trust me, I've seen some of the quotes that other companies put out there, and if you think we're expensive, then
well, everything's relative. I had a video out as well where I discussed price quite openly, and you prepare yourself whenever we do this for the inevitable onslaught of how much, you're a rip-off merchant, you know, you're extortionate. And I've had this week because I've had a thing where we discuss price, and everything is relative. We live in a free market economy. You can charge whatever you want for whatever you have to sell, and either people will pay it or they don't. There's a customer or a potential customer at every price point for every potential tradesman, cabinet maker, whatever. And it's a question of finding the right fit for you, the right customers for the sort of work that you do, and for the sort of prices that you want to charge. There's no right or wrong prices. It's hard to get that across to people sometimes. And as well, some people really struggle to understand the concept that not everything is about price. Sometimes it's about service. You know, it's what you do and how you do it, almost as much as the finished article.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing that people don't see that we do see is we see the wide range of, from the cheapest to the most expensive. You've in terms of people commenting on our videos.
Yes.
So we see that range of prices, and perhaps when people go on and just quickly put a comment on a video, they don't get to see that, and they just think, "Oh, you sound expensive. You must be ripping people off."
Yes.
And what they don't see is that, yeah, but I'm seeing comments of people saying that they charge a quarter of what I charge, and I'm seeing people saying that they charge 2 or 3 times as much as what I charge. You know, in the scheme of things, I think we're fairly middle of the road for the areas of the country we're in.
Yes.
And I think generally speaking, the vast majority of people don't bat an eyelid to the prices that we charge, and it tends to be a kind of select minority either saying were far too cheap or saying were far too expensive. But that's a minority, and the vast majority seem to be, that seems to be fairly normal price range that you're quoting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been enjoying the series that you're doing about
shells for tools. Yeah, I've got a series out at the minute, which concludes today, the day we're recording, actually, where I use the price of a job not just to purchase the materials, but also to buy the tools that you need. I mean, it's a silly video, really, because you wouldn't actually do that in practice. But it establishes, it's cemented in my mind, certainly, just how many little bits and pieces that you need to do a job. When you start actually, a bit like when you start adding up the amount of time you spend on things like your boxes, your delivery boxes. When you start looking and when you start going through the video and having to put a ka-ching sound in for every time you use a tool, it's amazing how often that comes up. It's very regular. And again, I've found myself reaching for things automatically that I didn't really need. I used my nice square in this job a couple of times, and I didn't need that because I already priced in a regular sort of Barco sliding square for the job, so I ended up doing myself out of a few quid that way. But yeah, it's been a fun series to do. It's made me think about how you build things, how you construct things. It's made me think about doing things, as cheaply as possible, because the idea of the series was to come away with a profit at the end of it, having purchased all the tools that you need from the price of the job. And again, it's a silly idea, really, because obviously you've got to make a living out of it, so you wouldn't necessarily do that. But I know I've used a job to buy tools that I've needed for that job. I priced those into the price of the job. I did that earlier in the year when I bought my Graco sprayer, for example. I knew that was a lot of spraying involved in that job, so I used the job to buy that and get into that side of things. It's how you improve. It's upping your game, as always. We've mentioned this before. It's one way of doing it without having to sort of buy stuff on credit cards or whatever else.
Yeah, and I'm exactly the same. And I regularly get people commenting to the channel saying, "Oh, have you not thought about buying XYZ?" And it's like, well, as soon as a job comes up that would pay for XYZ, I will. But if I can do it with the tools I've got, I'm not going to buy it specially. But if I run into a job where it's going to either save me more time than the value of the tool, or it's a job that I can only do with that particular tool, then I will get it for that particular job. But if I've already got the tool, then it's just going to have to wait, as much as I would love to have it. But I've got very, very few. There's the odd little impulse buy. I remember when Screwfix had their label printers on special. We might have chatted about it on this show, I can't remember, but they had the little brother label printers for 50 quid, and they were normally 150 quid, or they're normally pretty expensive, and I thought, that's a really good price, and I picked one up and I labelled a few things with it, and largely it's sat in the box and never been used.
Yeah.
And
it's absolutely, it's one of those things that when you've got it, you'll use it occasionally, and it's really handy. But we've got one as well, and it is useful for some things. But yeah, you go through a phase of labelling lots of things up, and then, as you say, it sits there dormant. On the other hand, unlike Skype, when you call on it to do the job it's designed to do, it actually does print a label for you reasonably well without too much fuss or bother.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that I forget I've even got it, and it's not until I'm like, I don't know, I'm pulling another box out from under the cabinets, and it's like, oh, I've got a label printer. I forgot I even had that. It's because I use it so infrequently. And then I think, oh, I must label all this stuff up, and I'll do it when I've got a quiet second. And then I forget about it for another few months. And then I come across it again. It's like, oh, I've got a label printer. I didn't know I had that.
Yeah.
So, but that's, relatively inexpensive purchase. But for big purchases, I do always try and justify it with either improving what I've got, or if a tool breaks and trying to get something better that's not going to break as quickly in the future, and that you know. But yeah, interesting. So we got some follow-up last week, from the last show, which is good, and I'm pleased we have, because we didn't get as much follow-up as I thought we would get, because it was quite a contentious subject. We
thought it was contentious, obviously, and perhaps not everybody else did.
And we were, if you haven't listened to episode 15, we're chatting about the state of joinery education, specifically in the UK, but we would love to hear about your stories elsewhere in the world about education in the area that we work. And we were also chatting about women in the construction industry as well, and what can potentially be done to tip the balance a bit more in favour of women working in construction, because it's so male dominated.
Yeah. And interestingly, as far as I know, and I haven't obviously seen everything, but we haven't had any follow-up on the women in construction topic at all. I don't think anybody has got hold of us to discuss that further.
I don't think we have, unless we've missed it. And if you do leave a comment somewhere and we've missed it, do feel free to pester us, because it's one of those things where we've got comments coming in on a lot of different platforms, and it is very easy to miss something.
That's right. I noticed in the show notes here we've got a comment that came in via the YouTube channel, and I hadn't seen that because I just tend not to look at it very much, and my apologies. But we put the podcast out on YouTube as a last resort kind of thing. Really, we expect people to listen to it either through the website or ideally through the podcast player of your choice. The best way to contact us is either, again, email the show, which is contact@measuringuppodcast.com, or through our Twitter, @measuringuppc on Twitter, or through Instagram @measuringuppodcast. Those are generally the best ways. They will reach both of us. I've had a few people contact me either through my personal Twitter accounts. Again, I do have a separate one for the YouTube channel, which is @10Minute Shop on Twitter. That'll reach us, but the best way to reach us both is to actually contact us directly at the show. We've set up all these accounts specifically for that.
Yes. And so one person did get in touch via YouTube, as you were saying, and I only spotted it last night when I was quickly checking the YouTube comments, and it was like, oh.
I'm glad you checked it.
Well, I don't check it very often, and it was only by chance that I went on and I saw it there. And I'm not going to name him because I don't want to embarrass him, because he did say in his comment, and we were chatting specifically about what it means to be a time-served joiner and all this sort of thing. He is a time-served joiner, utmost respect to him, and, I always have respect for people who have been working in the industry much, much longer than I've been working in the industry. But he said, I think Andy has it completely wrong about being time served, and I think that he secretly recognises that. And Peter doesn't give a jot.
Interesting take. I don't think I said that, but anyway.
No, and I don't think I said that either. And I think all I would say is go back and listen to the episode, because I did actually say, if you're in college at college age, 16, 17, 18, do it. Definitely do the qualifications and get your apprenticeship, because it's pretty much your only chance to do it. And that was really the point I was trying to get across.
You did specifically say, if you're interested in a career in the carpentry, cabinet making, joinery business, get qualified. Actually, go to college, do your quali, get an apprenticeship somehow.
Yeah,
because that's as we said throughout the course of the last show. Now is the time to do it when you're young, because it gets progressively harder to do the older you get.
Yeah, and I think his comment to you was probably a little bit tongue-in-cheek. And
I suspect so.
And yeah, there would be literally no point in you getting qualified. You've been doing it for the best part of 20 years, and
yep.
And
I might be doing it for 2 more, so yeah, no point in
Well, exactly. It would be the biggest waste of time and money. So yeah, he says that he thinks that I've got it completely wrong, but he didn't say what I've got wrong. So it would be really handy if he could maybe post back or email the show or something like that and just say what specifically you think I have got wrong, because my understanding, as I said last time, is that to become time served, you have to serve an apprenticeship, and an apprenticeship can be anything from 1 year. And I know he happened to do a 5-year apprenticeship, but, brilliant.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, an apprenticeship could be anything just as low as 1 year. And I'm definitely not saying don't do an apprenticeship. Absolutely, if you're at that age where you can do it, do it. But trying to go down that route, and if someone could explain to me the route that I could go down as a mid-40-year-old with a family, that would get me qualified. Although even then, I've
got a question. What would the qualification do for you?
Exactly, and that's
it wouldn't enhance your current business at all. You're not doing site work. You're not a site chipper. You're not going to go onto a new build housing estate, construction site, and start fitting doors and windows.
Yeah,
that's not what you want to do, is it? That's
no. And as far as I'm concerned, that'll never be what I'm going to do. And the thing that I'm doing now, I'm very happy doing. I might refine things over time into working more with, veneers or solid woods, or, I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm at the beck and call of what the customer asks for,
Exactly, yeah. But I know I get a few comments about, all your stuff's painted white. Yeah, that's because people...
That's what they want.
White painted stuff, I'll paint it any colour they like. It is overwhelmingly white in varying shades, but yeah.
So, but no, I have no intention to ever work on a building site, because I've got a successful business. In order to, and this is the other thing, in order to go through the qualification process, I would have to shut down my business, and I would probably have to shut down my YouTube.
Yeah.
So that would be 2 years worth of YouTube, over 2 years worth of YouTube on the Gosforth Handyman side, not to mention other channels that have been a lot longer than that, down the pan. And it would also be my business that I've spent a long time building up down the pan.
Down the Swanee, yeah.
And it would effectively be going back to college, doing everything full time, and then restarting everything again from scratch in order to get a piece of paper that no one has ever asked for and no one ever will ask for while I'm self-employed. And I just don't really, in my stage and what I'm doing at the moment, I just don't quite see the point of it, but maybe I'm missing something. I would definitely consider, and I've looked up the thing I was talking about last time, which was the shortcut route.
Yes.
And it's called the I don't know if it's EWPAR or EWPAR, which is the Experience Worker Practical Assessment route. And it says if you've got 5 years experience as a carpenter, you can fast track your route to getting an NVQ. And I think it gets you an NVQ level 2. And from there you can then upgrade to a level 3 afterwards, I think.
Right.
But it basically lets you pay an extortionate amount of money to a training company who assess your work over, I think, only over a couple of days. Now, I've really struggled to find out what you have to do in that couple of days, and the only thing that I've managed to firmly find out is that you have to build a stud wall.
Nice. That's a test of your dovetailing skills, isn't it?
Maybe there's more to it. But I've searched and I can't find any information about what you have to do on this test. If it was going in and showing them that I know how to build an alcove unit, maybe I would be a bit more inclined to say, okay, maybe you can pick us up on a few things that I'm doing wrong, Or,
how many stud walls have you built in your 20-year career, Andy, out of interest?
Less than a handful,
Yeah.
One of my...
I think I can count them on the thumb of one hand.
Yeah, I've built a few, but they're not rocket science to build, and they're not something that... Sorry, I don't want to take anything away from people who do house framing, because obviously there's a lot more to making a stud wall than what you would do in this fast track assessment route. But in the fast track assessment route, it's not rocket science. It's literally, by what I understand, like a 4 meter long stud wall, that you straight stud wall with a doorway. Obviously, when you get into house framing and you can get into like complex angles and, you know, doorways and windows and fancy bits and pieces, like anything, it'll get a lot more complicated, and that's where your trained framing guys would just take over at that point. It's just not a thing I do.
Yeah.
We have some very exciting news, and we are booked in for Maker Central 2019.
And this year, I am actually going to turn up, I promise. No, we've pushed the boat out, and we're getting ourselves a stand, aren't we, Andy?
We are. Not only are we going to be there, and I was there last year. It was awesome. Highly recommend it to everyone listening to this show, wherever you are in the world. Come to Birmingham NEC next, I think it's May next year, May 2019, for Maker Central. Last year there was a whole load of awesome makers, Jimmy DeResta, Matt Cremona, Bob Claggett, to name but a few, and loads of other people, really big names in the maker community and in the woodworking world. And there's loads of big names coming up at the next one as well. Very exciting.
And us.
And we'll be there hiding away in a corner somewhere. But if you do want to come along and have a bit of a chat, we would be more than happy. And last year when I was there, loads of people came and said hello, and it was fantastic. But I didn't really have a base. I was just kind of wandering around, and a lot of people said that they came to have a chat and they couldn't find me. So what we're going to do, we're having a stand for the Measuring Up podcast, and we're both going to be on it. So you can find us and come and have a chat anytime, and we'll be there for the full 2 days.
Very excited about that. We will. It may well be the first time that we meet, actually.
I know, that's it. Yeah, we've never met in person. It's the most bizarre thing.
We probably hate each other.
Oh, can you imagine? It'd be like that.
If we don't hate each other at the start, then we'll hate each other at the end of a 3 meter square stand.
The demise of the Measuring Up podcast, May 2019. But no, I can't wait. Really excited. We'll probably have a few bits and pieces, like bit of t-shirts,
a bit of merch and
bit
stuff.
of merch on the stand that you can pick up, and we'll get that all sorted out. But we're booked in. We will be there, and can't wait. As I say, last year was amazing, and it looks like it's going to be one of these shows that's just going to get bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, it seems to. I missed the last year, which was the first one, because I was in New York, which is also awesome, but it was about the only time I wished I was in Birmingham instead of New York. But really looking forward to this one, and it's going to be great.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm again, just to go off on a slight tangent. I look in on a couple of Facebook groups, and there was just to promote my channel, to be perfectly honest, and there was somebody who posted on there that they're in some, I don't know what the building is, but they want a 3 meter high, 4 meter long stud wall built with a door in it, and it had to be flame retardant because there are heating pipes that get very hot up near the ceiling. And they were, again, getting back to price, they had their breath taken away by how much somebody was quoting them. And I reckon, 4 meters long, 3 meter high stud wall that's fireproof, with a doorway in it, so it's got to be a fire door. I would have said a couple of days to build that and clad it and everything.
How is it getting clad?
They didn't say flame retardant, so I would assume either fireproof plasterboard, dot and dab, or cement board or something.
Okay.
Don't know. Anyway, back and forth on this. I wasn't part of the conversation, but the quote they got was, I think, $2,300. I presume that included that. That didn't seem bad to me.
It without knowing more about the job, but I mean, including
they did. Yeah, they didn't say where they were, or they presumed that people knew where they were. I guess.
It's so hard to say. I mean, is it just a straight run between two walls?
I believe so, yeah.
Or is it some sort of freestanding?
No, I believed it was a straight run between two walls. But, floor to ceiling with a fire door, it's not complicated to do, but it's reasonably time-consuming.
Yeah, it's ballpark, isn't it? I would certainly say, depending on where you are in the country, anywhere between, 1,500 and $2,500, well, maybe even $3,000, depending on where you are. Once you take into account fire door and all that.
It was just an interesting one. Since we're talking to stud walls here, they'd worked out the material cost at £500 or £600, and reckoned it should only take a day of somebody to do the work. So they were expecting, £800-900, I think, for one guy and a labourer for a day, plus the materials. So I think that was. I would have thought that was a bit optimistic, but hey. Anyway, sorry, we drifted off on a tangent there. Getting back to our commenter on YouTube, he does say he's 63 and still working very hard and thoroughly enjoys it. And he also says he's learnt bundles from the pair of us, which is very generous of him. Hopefully not all the bad things, but he does say he winces sometimes when he sees some of the things on YouTube. He says he shudders. And I think we all do, don't we?
That's across the board. It's absolutely across the board, and not just on joinery stuff. But I mean, as you know, I play the drums and have a couple of drumming channels, and some of the drum education that I see out there is just fundamentally wrong. And you're looking at the video, and it's like, no, please, children learning how to play the drums, don't watch this video, because you will end up being crippled trying to play the instrument if you follow the advice that they're given. And and unfortunately that's part of the course, but hopefully the decent videos are the ones that I was going to say get the most views, but it's it doesn't always work like that, unfortunately.
You're going to start talking about cats and cucumbers again, aren't you?
I know. I'll go off on a tangent.
So let's not. We also had another comment in who said, enjoying the podcast despite only being a beginner woodworker. Do we have any tips for clamping glue-ups? He says he uses a mixture of F-clamps, G-clamps and quick clamps. But when he tightens them, one of the pieces always moves. Any suggestions on how to stop this? I've had a few people mention to me, and I've never tried it, that if you're using a water-based glue like PVA, you actually sprinkle a little bit of salt in there as well. And that helps create a little bit of friction as you tighten the clamps. It stops them moving. I've never tried it because, oddly enough, I don't have a salt shaker in the workshop. Perhaps I should.
Well, here's an alternative that works very well. Sawdust, but it has to be a very, very fine sawdust, and don't use too much, otherwise you'll knock up your glue joint.
Okay.
But even just a sprinkling of like MDF sawdust or something like that, which is so fine that it's not really going to make any difference to the structure of the joint.
Okay.
But it can be enough to add that little bit of friction. And you have a bit of a play and experiment with it to see how much you need. You don't need very much, but that can help. Most of the time, it's a bigger mess on trying to find the sawdust than it is just realigning the joint. So it's up to you whether or not you find. I went through a phase of trying to put a little sprinkle of sawdust in the joint to stop it moving when I clamped it up, and then eventually it was no quicker than just realigning
it. And again, not to beat the drum for biscuit jointers or dominoes, but a large part of what they do is for alignment.
Yeah.
To stop things moving when you put a clamp on them. And yeah, it is a nuisance. One of the things I do is try not to have the glue in there too thickly, so have it spread relatively thinly, and give it a rub if you can. Depending on the length of the joint, give it a rub so some of the glue sort of soaks in, and then clamp it.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely give the two surfaces a bit of a rub together and then do it, and that should help a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's of help to Ian.
Yeah. So do you have I mean, I think most people end up with a mixture of clamps, don't they? I've got a real ragtag collection of F clamps and quick clamps, and I haven't got any G clamps actually. Don't own any.
As per usual, I've never got enough.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the clamps that I use, which are just the easiest ones, are kind of, your Irwin trigger clamps,
quick clamps,
yeah, and I use those for the vast majority of stuff, and then I've got a few kind of bigger ones that I use for bigger glue ups and whatnot, just cheapy big bar clamps, and they tend to work really well. I've got a couple of nice parallel clamps, but they are so expensive.
Yeah. Tell me, parallel clamps. Why are they so expensive? What's the big deal about them? Do the jaws stay absolutely parallel as you tighten them?
Yeah. So the idea is if you're doing a big glue up of like a tabletop or something, then the ends don't bow out or anything. Whereas with some types of clamps, when you tighten them, the ends can start to kind of bow out of shape slightly.
Yeah. So as the bar, if it's just a bar clamp, that'll bow and that'll change the.
And then that can cause the glue up not to dry flat effectively, and then you have to kind of clamp bits of wood to the top and bottom to keep it straight and things. Whereas with the parallel clamps, it's much less inclined to do that. So, and certainly if you put a couple of parallel clamps on the bottom and a couple of parallel clamps on the top, and have them where the bar is pretty much touching the piece, it's almost guaranteed to give you a completely flat glue up without any other clamping of bits of wood to it and stuff. But I don't know why they're so expensive. They're crazily priced for what they are, but I don't make that many tabletops.
No, me neither. I don't sort of do those sort of glue ups, to be honest. Most of the things I glue up in the workshop tend to be doors, cabinet doors, so that's about as big as it goes. And to be honest, a cheap F clamp, as long as when you're clamping the ends square, as long as you keep the bowing part, if you keep the bar at the side, not above or below it, then if the jaws come out of parallel, it doesn't really matter. It's just applying pressure squarely. Yeah.
And we got another comment from Derek saying that he listens to the show in Vancouver and he builds things for a hobby, and he watches both of our channels and listens to the podcast. And he was asking, he was saying that he watches Mike Farrington's YouTube channel, which we've mentioned.
Friend of the show, Mike Farrington, yeah.
Yes, we've mentioned Mike on the show before, and Mike does some lovely work over in Colorado, I think. Very similar business to ours. And
with a workshop that's 10 times the size of both of us combined. Yeah.
And he was saying that he was struck by the similarities of the project, but also big differences in the approach that he takes to get them done, and be fascinated to hear our opinions on the differences in approach, not to discover which is better, but just why there's a difference in approach between what we do and what Mike does. And I think there's one very simple answer to that.
Space. Yeah. In fact, let me quick sub question on this. I am the magic genie of the lamp, and I can grant you any one of two wishes. I can give you more space or more time. Which would you go for?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
Really?
I would actually say more space.
Yeah, I go for space all day long. I asked my wife. My wife does. She has a little small sewing room, and she does very fine, beautiful quilting, very intricate sort of stuff. I've posted a few little bits on Instagram, and I asked her, and she said, "Oh no, she'd go for more time every time." Whereas I've been struggling this week with building stuff. I had. I think I mentioned it in the last show, the big set of bookshelves that I've had to make in 3-4 separate parts. And getting those out of the workshop was a real pleasure because it made the little workshop feel so spacious. But just having to move everything around just to wrap them up for delivery was such a chore. More space every time, more space, and I can use my time better.
It would just make the whole process so much more enjoyable as well, rather than tripping over things. You know, I've had it where I've got a unit completely finished and I've been working away and I've been doing something else, and then, you know, just about to deliver it to the customer, and then because I haven't got enough room, I've walked past it and accidentally kicked the side of it and chipped a bit off.
Yep.
And it's just at the point where, and it's like, oh, well, there's another hour of work I need to do to fix that before it goes out. And it's that struggle for space. And it doesn't come across in our videos anywhere near as bad as it is, because, I mean, often in the video that actually is coming out tomorrow, which is the making of these transport cases. And for example, there's one little bit where I'm using a chisel and I'm chiseling out the hinge recesses and whatnot on the cabinets. And the only way that I can get the camera in to film this one particular bit, I have to be standing at an angle where I'm chiseling towards my own wrist, which is like obviously not what you should be doing. But there was no other way that I could get the unit in the right place, me in the right place, and the camera in the right place, because I didn't have enough room to get the camera around the other side because there were other things in the road. And it meant that, and I ended up having to put a warning on the screen saying, don't chisel towards your own wrist. But there's just no other way I could have done that shot.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, doing YouTube videos introduces a whole other dimension of workshop difficulties as well. Doesn't it?
Yeah. Because I've seen too many videos that I've done where I've just worked normally and then all you can see is my elbow and my back. Yeah. And it just like, well, I might as well just not bother filming myself. So at least here you can see the chisel going into the wood, and luckily it didn't also go into my wrist.
Good.
But it's like, well, it's either that or you don't get that shot at all, because I just can't get the camera in. And yeah, you know, finishing, and I was trying to think of ways, you know, because for this project that I was on doing the transport things, it would have been the perfect spray job, because they're like awkward, they're not flat, it's not an easy thing to roller, everything had to be like painted in the corners before rollering the big panels and stuff, and it just would have been a great job to spray. And I just worked through the whole thing in my head and thought, right, how would I do this? Once I've got one of them sprayed, where would I put it?
Yeah.
And I've got 4 of these to do. So where would the one that I've finished, how would I pick it up and move it?
Yeah.
That would be difficult enough without damaging the freshly sprayed finish. And then where would I put it? I would have to put it somewhere where it's not going to get covered in spray dust off all the other things that I would need to spray. And I would have to do that 4 times. And it's not just for one of them, but it's like, then I need to find somewhere to put the other 2 while I'm spraying the 4th one.
Yeah.
And then that has to be obviously repeated for the 3 coats of paint. And it just, I couldn't work out any way that I could, because obviously the ideal way is that you have all of them set up maybe on some sort of turntable thing where you can spin them round while you're spraying, and that would have been the ideal solution if I had a finishing room of some description, and then they could just sit there happily drying, and then I could come along and do the top coats and do it again.
Well, the solution is, for me anyway, what I do is I spray the components and then build it afterwards.
Yeah.
So you're spraying the flat panels, and then if the bits need touching up, you can get the complete physical thing in and just do a little tickle if needed in the corners or something. That seems to work reasonably well. Although again, I had the same problem. I've just done a big set of shelves, big bookcase, which had to be made in 4 separate pieces. Each individual section had 7 components to it, and the base one had 11. So there are many pieces, and what I you know, at the end when all the spraying is done, I'd take my knock down spray booth down, and of course I can't get it out of the room because the room it lives in is full of painted stuff that's still drying, and you think, yeah, so you're completely stymied. Space, more space,
definitely
please,
space.
More space. I would take more space over more time any day of the week.
Yeah. And Mike has a stunning workshop, and he does some beautiful work. But I would say that is a major difference between, some of the bit. He's got like a giant panel saw, I think. He's got the stunning assembly table. Motorized assembly table.
Torsion box.
Yeah, And yeah, it's just having the space to fit that stuff in. And for the life of me, and I'm still looking for a bigger workshop, and I've been looking, and I can't find anything that would cost me less than the extra money that I would have to make to pay for it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, frighteningly, it makes sense to me. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, around here, and I'm constantly looking, and especially for it to be worth the while of moving, it's got to be a fairly major step up in size. You know,
Yes.
I'm not going to move just for an extra 100 square feet or something. It's got to be at least double what I've got at the minute. And you're looking, with running costs and everything else, minimum 10 grand a year around here. And so I would have to make an extra £10,000 a year just to pay for the workshop.
Just to stay where you are, yeah.
And I would be literally no better off, but I would be doing a £10,000 more work just to
stay where you are.
So
you would also have to combine it with somehow upping your game or being able to charge more.
Exactly.
In order to do just to pay for the space you're doing it in.
The only way I could do that would be to start employing staff and to grow it into a thing that I don't want to grow it into, because then it just turns into a whole different animal. And I've already been through that in discussed in previous episodes. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It was an awesome time of my life, and I was in my 20s and 30s, and I had the energy to do that, and I didn't have a young family.
Yep.
But now I don't want the stress of building a joinery conglomerate.
No.
Not at the moment, and I can't see it ever happening, to be honest. So, you know, one day I might be able to find a property where I could live at the property and maybe build a workshop on site, or like a bigger shop on site. But even that's hard in the UK, you know, unless you're buying an old farm building or something, you know, you don't get, unfortunately, you're not allowed to build on the countryside, even though we have the highest house prices like anywhere, and 96% of the UK isn't built on. You're not allowed to build on that 96%. And
I've got to preserve those green fields, Andy. Come on.
We've got to preserve the green fields. Otherwise, lots of people will complain about you building a house on it. Normally, people who are already living on the green fields.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting follow-up questions, I thought.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, just moving on from that for a sec. I mean, obviously, Mike Farrington's YouTube channel, I think when we first mentioned Mike, I think it was just season one. We both really admired what he'd done. We really liked how he'd put his videos together. But now we're podcasting professionals and you know, professional YouTubers, sort of, kind of. Do you find yourself being more critical is the wrong word, but more aware of how other people do stuff and how other people put their podcasts or their YouTube videos together?
Certainly on the YouTube side, my biggest bugbear is bad audio.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. And I put a video together on my channel of, you know, how to operate a simple lav mic arrangement, and you've got it with a shotgun mic, and, you know, we've got decent audio on our channels. And I think bad audio on a video is the biggest turn off for me. You know, if a video comes on and I'm having to turn my amp on to like nearly full blast to hear what the person's speaking, and then the next video comes on and it nearly blows my speakers up, it's just inexcusable. It's such an easy thing to fix. You know, you can pick up a lav mic and a little portable recorder for probably 50 quid second hand on eBay. You don't even need the recorder. You can record straight to your phone.
Record to your phone. Yeah, there are plenty of apps that'll do that.
Yeah, get a little like lav mic, record to your phone, synchronize it afterwards. I made a video all about how to do that, and it's my least viewed video. Well, certainly one of my least viewed videos on my channel. I don't think it's even broke the 1,000 views mark. It's like, and it's like, well, you know, I've tried to tell you what you need to do, but no one's interested. So
unfortunately, yeah, it does seem to be a step too far for a lot of people to actually record audio separately. And I've got to say, I found it to be a pain in the neck to record audio separately. I've done it a few times, and I've come up with my way of doing it, which is to boom a little shotgun mic so that it reaches closer to me. There's no, despite, I'll, you know, tread a fine line here, but despite what the audio guys will tell you, there's no particular magic to recording great audio. It's get the microphone as close as you can to your talent. And you know, there's a little bit more to it than that, but getting the mic close is a huge start. What you don't want to do is set your camera on the other side of your workshop and talk like this from a distance, because that's always going to sound horrible. It'll sound echoey and nasty, much like having a hands-free phone call held at arm's length, you know, on your phone. It's not good.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you don't want to do the synchronization of audio and video afterwards, then go down your route where you've got the mic plugged straight into the camera, so it effectively replaces the audio track on the footage coming straight out of your camera. The major benefit of going down your route is that you don't have to be carrying around a lav mic and worrying about whether the disadvantage of having a lav mic, where certainly when you've got a mic that close to you, sometimes it can pick up the odd pop and breath noise and things like that. And you do have to be careful. And I've tried a few different ways of maybe turning the mic at an angle so that it's not directly under my path of breath, if that makes sense. Yeah. But then, you know, they're very direct. Well, they tend to be quite directional. And then often you can lose too much of the signal. It ends up sounding a bit rubbish. So it's one, or you can put like a wind guard on it, but then that's a bit of a fanny on as well. Yeah. Or you go down the shotgun route of having a directional mic on top of your camera. Probably the main disadvantage there is probably the price, because you need a fairly decent mic. Yeah, to get a good quality.
I started with a really cheap, I'm going to say 20 quid, something like that, shotgun mic. I still have it. It was okay. Wasn't great, but it was okay. If you're starting out, you can do that.
And I think you can pick up because Rode have brought out a new video mic now, the Video Mic Pro Plus or something. I can't remember. Yeah. And so now you'll probably find the old video mic, the original Rode video mic is probably coming up secondhand on eBay, because I think you can get that still new for about 130 quid or something. They're not expensive. Yeah. Not
as microphones go.
God,
it's, you know,
yeah. Not quite. But if you only want to spend like 20 quid, you'll probably get better results going down the lav mic route. But as you say, if you've managed to, if you can find a decent shotgun mic for around 20 quid, then
we'll stick a link in the show notes to the one that I used, and you know, listen for yourselves. Yeah, go back, have a look and a listen to some of my early videos and see if you can spot the difference. When I got the Rode, I got the Video Mic Pro, and when I first started using it, it was like, man, I've paid 160 quid for this. It's like, it's a little bit richer sounding, I guess, but now when I go back and listen to the other earlier videos, it is much better. It is more rounded, much like the microphone that I'm using now for the podcast, as opposed to the ones that I used earlier. It has a slightly richer sort of tone to it, so it's better in that sense. But yeah, I think we've said before, I wouldn't want to live by the difference. I've found myself being much more aware, not critical, but much more aware of when I listen to other podcasts now. You can be listening to it and think, oh, that was an edit.
Yes.
I spotted that, yeah. Whereas before, you just sort of listen to the flow of the conversation, whatever else, and then these days I think, oh yeah, they've edited that. That's been chopped up and changed around somehow. You know, not in a bad way, but I'm just conscious of it. I'm more aware of it. one of the downsides, I think we've said before, of starting a podcast and a YouTube channel is that the first casualty is that you don't get to watch many YouTube videos anymore, and you don't get to listen to many podcasts because you're busy doing other things.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm in the workshop, I just burn through the podcast. So if I'm not on site, whereas on site it tends to be a little bit more awkward depending on where you are and stuff. But when I'm in the shop, unfortunately, because you've invariably got machines running all the time, you end up listening a lot of half conversations. And
yes,
but you know, if nothing else, it's kind of company while I'm working, and
yeah,
when you're working on your Todd in a shop all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. On the YouTube side, I'm more conscious of editing, I think, than anything, of how the videos, how the stories are constructed, and I'm more aware of. You watch something and think, yeah, you could have done with a cutaway there of a detail or something, or you know, that's a bad camera angle. You could have done something better with that, or my bugbear is jump cuts. Jump cuts.
I know you don't like your jump cuts.
They're just so easily avoided.
You know, like channels have made themselves just on doing jump cuts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's fine. You know, it's YouTube, it's not TV. I totally understand. But at the same time, you know, they're unnecessary. And I'm talking about somebody talking to camera with a jump cut, not doing jump cuts through a process to speed it up or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, but that's just me.
You must see the amount of jump cuts in my videos while I'm talking to camera.
I've noticed one or two, Andy. There's
hundreds. Yeah. There's hundreds.
It must take you forever to edit those together. Would it not be easier just to re-record it in one nice simple stream?
Oh God, no. I can trim them up and have it done so
honestly 20 30 takes, it'd be fine.
30 yeah. I mean, that's an interesting topic actually, because do you okay, how long have we got? We're 53 minutes in. Do you script your videos or
no?
Not at all.
Not generally, no. It depends what it is. If I've got a long piece to camera, then and I need to make very specific points, then yeah, I'll script it and I'll auto cue it, like type it out and stick it top and bottom of the lens kind of thing. But most of the time, no. I mean, there's in the concluding part of this 3-part Shelves for Tools series that I've got, which happens to be out today when we're recording. I do a long piece to camera where I talk about the prices, and that's completely ad-libbed. And then the outro where I say thanks for watching, you know, subscribe, want to thank my patron supporters, all that sort of stuff. I think I shot that 13 times, I think, just to get it all through in one take, because I just kept making stupid, silly mistakes on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you think, oh well, I'll just do one more and get the ending right, and then you know, eventually it comes and it flows. But it's not generally scripted. No.
I would say probably 25% of the time I'll script it. If it's a voiceover, I'll definitely script it, because I'll.
Oh yeah. The voiceovers are always
because I'll script it and then edit to the cut voiceover, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then for normal day-to-day stuff, I try not to script it, because I think it always sounds a little bit forced if you're reading off a script, and no matter how natural you try and make it sounding. And
do you do the thing as well where if you try and write a script for it and you try and make it sound as naturally as you can, you just almost automatically go off script?
Yes.
you put the words in the wrong order or something, and then you lose your place. And
literally within 2 or 3 words, I'm off script and I've gone off on a tangent. And something that I'd summarised very neatly down to one sentence will have turned into me just blabbling on for ages. And that's one of the reasons that I do sometimes try and script things, because I know I can just start whittering on. Yeah. And people have commented on my video, and it's like, yeah, I can't disagree, but sometimes I have to leave it in because it's the only way one bit will then naturally flow into the next bit. So after I've started blabbling on, it's like, well, if I take that out, the next bit's not going to make sense now, because I've kind of led up to talking about that. But then if I do try and keep it to a script, then it avoids all that. But then it sounds like I'm reading off a script.
Yeah.
So I try to avoid the script thing. But I think if I'm trying to get, as you say, some very specific points across. And the other problem that I have, I don't know if you get this, is that I forget what I've talked about.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I'll get halfway through a video and it's like, did I mention blah, whatever it is? And did I talk about this? And how did, and in what context did I talk about it? And sometimes you have to go back and watch the footage. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I did. I spent ages chatting about that. And literally no recollection of it whatsoever, because you're so engrossed in your brain's trying to process so many different things at the same time while you're trying to do a video. You're trying to do the job. You're thinking of the camera. You're thinking of the audio. You're thinking of what you have to say. And sometimes your brain just forgets to hit record in your own brain. In
your own mind, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the number of times I know I've repeated myself and, oh, man, I'll to take that section out because it sounds stupid if you've done the same thing twice over.
So this neatly leads into two big topics. I'll try and keep it brief. Did you see my does MDF have a grain video?
I did, yes. I thought your description of it being like a pad of paper that's glued together was absolutely perfect. Where you can't take a pad of sticky notes or whatever, and it's really hard to push a pencil through the top, but you can push it easily through one edge. It's that kind of grain. It's that kind of layers.
Yeah, exactly. And oh man, and the whole reason that I put that video together was kind of twofold. Partly because I'd had many comments on my channel. Well, some comments on my channel from people saying MDF doesn't have a grain. It's isotropic. And it has the same characteristics. Isotropic means that it has the same physical characteristics in all dimensions. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely doesn't. And anyone who works with MDF on a regular basis knows that it splits down the edge grain, but it doesn't split down the face grain. But there was quite a few people, and there's quite a lot of articles on the internet saying the same thing, saying that MDF is isotropic, and it's a load of rubbish. MDF is not isotropic. You try and split it down the face grain, it will not split down the face grain, and I illustrated that in the video that I made the other week. But it will very, very easily split down the edge grain. The amount of comments I got saying MDF doesn't have a grain, MDF doesn't have a grain. It's like, I'm not saying it has a grain like wood has a grain. I'm not saying that MDF has grown on a tree and therefore has growth rings. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's got a grain in the same way that paper has a grain, metal has a grain. That there's more. I would love to know whether these are people who just don't work with MDF and love wood so much that they don't want the word grain being used for anything other than
possibly
real wood. Or, I mean, at the end, and then quite a few people were saying, no, it's not a grain, it's made in layers. And it's like, well, it's not made in layers. Plywood's made in layers.
Yeah.
It's not, the fibres are arranged kind of horizontally to the way that the wood was pressed. But in the same way that if you take a bunch of pencils and drop them on the floor, you wouldn't describe the pencils dropped on the floor as being made in layers.
Yeah.
But
that's a good one. Yeah.
If you glued them all together, they would split in layers. And I'm not denying that, but they're not made in layers. And I think saying that because a few people were saying, oh, yes, is MDF made like paper where you get lots of sheets of it and glue it together? And it's like, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not made like that at all. It'll split like that, but it's not made like that. And I think so you have to be careful, especially as a YouTuber where I'm trying to get across something of educational value. If I say it's made in layers, it's just fundamentally wrong. It's not made in layers. It'll split in layers anyway. But it's such a ridiculous semantic thing to worry about anyway. You can come up with whatever word you want to use to describe how MDF will split. The sensible word is a grain in the same way that paper has a grain and other materials have a grain.
Yep.
If you want to use a different word, that's fine. I don't think layers is the correct word, but whatever. I had more unsubscribes from my channel.
Seriously?
From that video than I've ever had from any other video.
My word.
Just because people disagreed with the word that I used to describe.
Wow.
Yeah. So isn't that crazy? And
that's madness.
The main reason that I made that video is because of the Test Tuesday video that I had this week, where I was discussing screwing into the edge grain of MDF.
It doesn't have a grain.
Oh, sorry, into the edge layers of... No, it's not layers. The edge...
Also, can I just point out, Test Tuesday was on a Wednesday this week. What's going on?
I know. It took forever, that video.
Through me.
I figured if I don't say anything, no one will notice. In a couple of weeks, time, no one will pay any attention to the fact that it was a day late. But yes, I was desperately trying to get it out on time. But I was out at the cinema with me son on...
well, quite right too. They're a lot of work, though, those test things, because you test so many.
And now that I've got the screen synchronizer, because before, it's all very well that it now logs to the laptop, but you couldn't see the laptop screen very well when I was videoing the laptop, so I thought, right, I'm going to have to do this in a way that I screen capture the laptop, and then synchronize the screen capture to the footage afterwards. And it was like, how am I going to synchronize that? Because the screen capture doesn't record any audio. And I would normally use my audio as a sync reference. But I managed to find a way of synchronizing the screen capture. But it just takes a long time, editing all that afterwards. But it seems to be working. I think as I do it more, it should get quicker. But so the whole reason I put what is... does MDF have a grain video together was so that the MDF screw test would make sense, because I would be referring to screwing into the edge of MDF and therefore having an explanation that the edge is different from the face had to come before that video. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So people have unsubscribed and they've missed out on my Test Tuesday. So
wow. Their loss.
Their loss. Exactly.
Yes, we'll have a bit more to say about that sort of thing in the after show, I'm sure.
Yes.
We've had a few belters this week. Oh, my.
All right, okay. I shall look forward to those in the after show, definitely. So just for anyone who's uncertain about what this whole after show thing is, because I know a lot of people are new to podcasts entirely and aren't familiar with Patreon and what Patreon is.
Indeed.
Patreon is just another website, and you can contribute as much as you want, and it just helps to kind of keep the lights on the project. Patreon take a little cut to keep their systems running, but the vast majority of what you pledge comes directly to us, and it helps pay for the hosting and everything else that's involved in running a podcast.
That's right.
And if you support us on Patreon, all you do is you go to patreon.com/measuringuppodcast, and you will get access to extra stuff, a behind the scenes kind of extra bit of recording, each episode, and it's only $1. So what's that, 90 pence or something, and you will get access to that. Not only access to today's one, but you'll get access to all the previous ones as well.
Absolutely.
So, yes, and we do like to have a little moan on about...
We do have a little moan on about some of the entertaining comments that we've had from some of our listeners and watchers and subscribers. But Patreon is a wonderful process. It's a very simple, straightforward way in which you can support the show. And we want to thank all of our Patreon supporters who do just that. In particular, I'd like to thank Douglas Deal, Thistledew, Brendan at the Shades Workshop, Tim Bowers, Nick Fajardo, Adrian Millington, Chris Davidson, Paul Gardner, Eddie Carroll, James Hewitt, Carl Pountney from Strawbite Workshop, Steve Avery, Peter Tone, Owen Bullock, Tony Carnell, and Adam Padley.
And I would like to thank especially as well Chris, Mark Duthie, Max Vietz, Mark Duff, Ben Harker, Harry Capper, John Lynch, Duncan, Chris Stokesmore, Ben Campbell at the Kernel Collective, Jason Williams, Wilson Chan, Kevin Steer, Dominique Kozishnson, Dominique, Andy Farmer, Randall Davis, and David Chisnell.
Yeah, that was smooth.
I thought so.
Have you been practicing?
I have. You know what it is? I have. And I'm still no better.
Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, of course, for generously supporting the show and making sure that we can indeed keep the lights on and the electrons moving. Andy Mac, how can people get hold of you if they need to see what you do and where you are?
If you're not offended by me calling the edge of MDF a grain, then you can follow my YouTube channel, Gosforth Handyman, and you can follow me on Twitter, Gosforth Andy on Twitter, and Gosforth Handyman on Instagram. And what about you, Peter?
I am 10minuteworkshop.tv. We'll take you straight to my YouTube channel, 10 Minute Workshop. You can contact me directly at 10 Minute Workshop on Instagram or at 10 Minute Shop on the Twitters. And that's kind of it, really. Of course, you can contact us here. Contact at measuringuppodcast.com to email us, or at measuringuppodcast on Instagram, or at measuringuppc on Twitter. Any of those will reach the general sort of show communications department. That would be me and Andy when we check in occasionally.
Exactly. And thank you once again for listening. And we shall see everyone on Patreon on the after show, and everyone else will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.